They said the land at Harrow Creek was cursed, that even the wind avoided its fences. But when a former forest ranger named Ava Morgan paid $5 for the deed to a forgotten ranch, she wasn't chasing superstition. She was chasing silence. What she found instead, hidden beneath the rot and dust of the old stables, was a dying wild mare, scarred, starving, and heavy with life. That night, as a storm gathered over the plains, Ava would realize the truth. Some ghosts don't wear chains. Some of them breathe. The last of autumn drifted through Harrow Creek, Wyoming, in the color of dying grass and lavender dusk. Cold wind rolled down from the Bighorn Mountains, sweeping across the open prairie in restless waves. The sky was a bruised mix of lilac and ash, and the fading sunlight stretched long over a fence line half collapsed under years of neglect. There was the smell of damp soil, rotting leaves, and the first taste of snow in the air, a scent that spoke of endings and beginnings all at once. The land was wide and empty, the kind of silence that swallowed sound instead of holding it. Once this place had echoed with the thunder of hooves and the shouts of ranch hands. Now only the wind spoke, low and unbroken, like a whisper for those still listening. In the distance, a handful of wooden houses sat scattered through the valley, thin trails of blue smoke curling from their chimneys. Red Hollow, the nearest town, lay 15 miles south, a single main street with a diner, a feed store, and a church that hadn't rung its bell in years. Harrow Creek itself was barely a name on a map. To most, it was forgotten ground. To Ava Morgan, it was a chance at something that didn't come with a price tag: silence. Ava Morgan, 33, former ranger of the Montana Fire District, carried her ghosts like the scar that trailed up her left forearm. A faded burn that the doctors said would heal, though they'd meant only the skin. 3 years ago, in the Bitterroot fire, she had lost her entire unit. 3 rangers and 2 rescue dogs. The flames had moved faster than wind, devouring forest and bone alike. Afterward, she'd walked away from the service without ceremony. The uniform was gone. The calls stopped coming, and the woods she'd once protected turned into places she could no longer enter. Since then, her life had been quiet, too quiet, as if she'd been living inside an echo. Then one morning, in a cafe outside Missoula, she saw a notice on the back page of a local paper. Restoration property auction, state of Wyoming. Abandoned lots. Starting at $5. She'd stared at the words longer than she should have. $5, a number too small to mean anything, yet it pulled something loose in her chest. Maybe it wasn't about the land, maybe it was about what it meant to start over, to see if something dead could still take root. She signed the papers that same week. The deed listed her new home as Harrow Creek Ranch, parcel 19B, Windfall County. When she packed her truck, she didn't take much. A few tools, a sleeping bag, her old Colt revolver, and a small leather-bound notebook, edges scorched, pages half-burned, the only thing she'd salvaged from the fire. The Ford F-150 groaned along the muddy road, tires spitting gravel. The world outside blurred between pine and fog. Tall, dark trees leaned over the trail like sentinels, their needles whispering in the wind. Every few miles, she passed broken wooden signs pointing toward Red Hollow, their letters faded by time and rain. On the radio, a man's voice warned, "Cold front approaching, expect early snow." Ava switched it off. She preferred the rhythm of the engine, the creak of the seat, and the steady hum of the tires over the dirt. Her fingers traced the worn leather of the steering wheel, where an old ranger's tag, 1467, was burned into the hide. The number was all that remained of a life she'd already buried. As daylight began to thin, she saw the sign she'd been looking for: Harrow Creek Ranch, Est. 1947. The letters were barely legible, carved into a splintered plank that hung crooked on one nail. Beyond it, the land spread open, a lonely sea of brown and gold, rippling under a wind that smelled of iron and rain. Ava parked beside the gate. The silence that followed was absolute, so deep she could hear the tick of the engine cooling. The house stood in the middle of the field, 2 stories of peeling paint, sun-bleached wood, and windows long since shattered. The roof sagged under the weight of years. Every gust of wind drew a sigh through its cracks. Behind it loomed a stable, half collapsed and buried under wild grass. The fence posts leaned, bound by rusted wire. Mud and silt had swallowed what used to be a corral. She stepped out, boots sinking into wet earth. The air carried the faint smell of decay, the kind of scent that came from things forgotten. Locals had called this place the Harrow Curse, she'd read. The story went that its last owner, a man named Riker, had vanished one night without a trace. His ranch, his horses, his name, all left to rot under the wind. Ava paused at the porch. The wooden boards groaned beneath her weight. She pushed the door open. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside, dust swirled like smoke in the orange light of sunset. There was a table split down the middle, a broken oil lamp, and the smell of something damp and stale that clung to every surface. A single photograph lay face down on the floor, its image long faded to a blur of grey. She smiled faintly, half to herself. $5 for a ghost, she murmured. When night began to fall, she took her flashlight and stepped outside again, drawn toward the dark shape of the stable. The door hung loose on one hinge, creaking with each gust of wind. She pushed it open, and the smell hit her first. Mold, rust, and something else beneath it. Something alive. Her beam cut through the dark. Dust particles floated like ash. She heard it then, a sound faint but unmistakable. Breathing. Shallow, ragged. She froze. "Hello?" Her voice came out soft, swallowed by the wind. The breathing hitched, a low rasp, followed by a muffled whimper. Ava's hand tightened on the flashlight as she stepped forward. The floor was slick with damp straw and mud. The air was thick enough to taste. Then the light caught a glint. Eyes wide and glassy, reflecting the beam back at her. Ava's heart stopped. Under a mound of matted straw lay a horse, a mare grey as smoke, ribs jutting out like the slats of a cage. One front leg was swollen, the other trembling under her weight. Her coat was streaked with old mud and fresh wounds, and her belly was round, tight, moving faintly. Pregnant. Ava dropped to one knee. The mare flinched but didn't try to move. Wind howled outside, rattling the walls like warning bones. "Easy, girl," Ava whispered, lowering the flashlight. "I'm not here to break you. I'm here to listen." The horse's ears twitched. She snorted softly, nostrils flaring with each labored breath. Ava pulled off her gloves, her scarred hand trembling slightly as she held it out. Her skin was rough, speckled with dirt and old burns, but her palm stayed open and still. "See," she murmured, "nothing to fear." The mare hesitated and then leaned forward, her muzzle brushing the back of Ava's hand. Her breath was hot and uneven. Under the beam, Ava saw the marks carved into her hide, thin red lines along her sides, the unmistakable pattern of a chain or restraint. Her heart tightened. Someone had done this. The mare shivered, hooves scraping the floor. Ava slipped off her coat and laid it gently across the animal's back. "You're freezing," she said. She pulled out her phone, tried to dial the nearest vet in Red Hollow. The signal flickered, then died, leaving only static. She tried again, nothing but the hiss of dead air. Outside, the wind picked up, slamming the stable door against the frame. Ava looked into those eyes, tired, dark, and impossibly human. "They did this to you, didn't they?" she said softly. The mare exhaled, long and slow, her head sinking toward the straw as if in answer. Ava unscrewed her water bottle and poured a little into her palm. "Here," she said, "drink." The horse hesitated, then let her tongue brush Ava's hand, warm and trembling. The simple act broke something inside her. A tear slid down Ava's cheek, cutting through the grime. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise." She looked around the stable, her flashlight beam landing on a fallen wooden plaque half buried in the straw. The letters were faded, but still legible. Sable. Stall 2. Ava exhaled, the faintest smile curling at the corner of her mouth. "You deserve a name," she said quietly. "Sable it is." The mare flicked an ear, as if she'd heard and accepted. Ava spread her blanket on the straw and sat beside her, back against the wall. Sable shifted, letting her head rest against Ava's shoulder. For the first time in years, the ranger didn't feel alone. Outside, the wind changed direction, carrying the scent of snow down from the mountains. Inside, the air filled with the rhythm of two breaths, one human, one wild, merging into something steady, alive, and wordless. As the flashlight dimmed and the last light slipped from the sky, the sound of the storm faded into silence. There, in the ruins of a forgotten ranch bought for $5, two creatures who had survived the fire in different forms shared the same fragile warmth. And somewhere beyond the wind, the land of Harrow Creek seemed to exhale, as if welcoming them both home. The first frost came quietly to Harrow Creek. At dawn, a pale mist hung over the fence line, beads of ice catching the thin sunlight like silver dust. Ava woke on the wooden floor of the house, a blanket and her old ranger's jacket pulled over her shoulders. Her body ached from sleeping on the boards, but the air was still, the kind of morning where sound itself felt fragile. From the porch, she could see the stable out back. Steam rose faintly from within, a ghostly warmth against the cold air. She carried a tin mug of coffee, the kind that bit with bitterness, and stood watching. Inside the stall, Sable lay on her side, her breathing shallow but steady. Her eyes were half closed, lashes coated with frost. Ava's stomach tightened. The mare was alive, barely, but one look told her that survival would not last long without help. She drained her coffee, shoved her gear into the truck, and threw an old canvas tarp into the bed. Then she whispered toward the stable, "Hold on, girl," before climbing into the driver's seat and firing the old Ford back to life. The road to Red Hollow was 20 miles of frozen dirt and blind corners. Fog hugged the pines, turning the world to white. In the rearview mirror, Ava could see the shape of the mare wrapped in her thick blanket, every breath forming a cloud that vanished as soon as it appeared. The tires skidded twice on ice, and she gripped the wheel tighter. When the outline of the small town appeared, a scatter of houses, a diner with its lights still off, a half-broken windmill turning slowly, Ava exhaled for the first time in miles. The sign came into view: Dr. Elise Hartman, Veterinary and Rescue Clinic. The letters were faded, the blue paint peeling from years of Wyoming wind. Ava honked once. The front door opened. Dr. Elise Hartman was in her mid-40s, hair tied back, her limp subtle but constant, the trace of some long-forgotten accident. She wore flannel and a heavy vest, her expression tired but sharp. "I don't open this early," she said, squinting through the fog. Ava jumped down from the cab, eyes steady. "You do today." Elise frowned. "Whatever it is, it can—" Then she saw the mare. Her tone changed instantly. "Bring her in, now." Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed to life, filling the clinic with cold white. The smell of disinfectant hit hard. Ava helped guide Sable down from the truck, the mare's legs trembling as she crossed the slick floor. "Get that blanket off," Elise ordered, "and keep talking to her. Let her know you're here." Ava obeyed. Her voice was low, steady, the same tone she'd used years ago with frightened dogs in smoke-choked forests. "It's okay, Sable. You're safe now." Elise worked fast. She cleaned the gashes, stitched the torn skin, administered antibiotics, and hung a saline drip from a metal rack. The rhythmic drip of fluid was the only sound between them. After a long while, Elise straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her eyes softened. "If you'd come a day later," she said quietly, "neither the mare nor the foal would have made it." Ava only nodded. Her throat was too tight for words. She placed her hand on Sable's neck, feeling the faint, slow heartbeat beneath the thin skin. Elise watched her for a moment, then asked, "Where did you find her?" Ava hesitated. "In my stable." The older woman frowned. "Your stable?" Ava nodded. "I bought the old Riker ranch for $5. Something flickered across Elise's eyes. Surprise first, then caution. "You might want to be careful, Ranger. That land's got stories." "I've heard," Ava murmured, looking down at the mare, "but I'm starting to think the stories are real." 3 days later, the snow still hadn't fallen, but the air was sharp enough to cut. The sky stretched pale and brittle over the plains when Ava returned to the clinic. Sable was standing now, unsteady, thin, but alive. Her coat had been brushed clean, her eyes brighter. When Ava stepped into the stall, the mare turned her head, ears flicking toward her like recognition. "She remembers you," Elise said, appearing behind her with a clipboard. "She's tough, but she's carrying late term." You'll need to keep her warm, keep her fed, and keep her calm. Ava nodded. Elise handed her a small bag of medicine and a half-used roll of gauze. How much do I owe you? Elise waved a hand. Save your money, buy hay instead. She gave a small smile. Let's call it even. I owe her a second chance. On the drive back, Ava lowered the tarp to let Sable look out. The wind whipped through, carrying the clean scent of pine and distant snow. The mare lifted her head and stared across the open fields as if recognizing home. For the first time in months, Ava felt something stir inside her. Not peace, but motion. The faint pulse of life pushing back against silence. That afternoon, Ava began to clean out the stable. She replaced the rotten boards, scrubbed the walls with bleach and vinegar, and shoveled away the moldy straw. The work was slow, heavy, and strangely grounding. Sable watched from her stall, tail flicking gently. When Ava reached the far wall, she noticed something. A faint brand scorched into the mare's left flank. She wiped the dirt away and froze. The letters were barely visible, but unmistakable. R7. Ava traced the burned scar with her fingertips. The skin quivered under her touch. R7, she whispered. The sound felt wrong in her mouth. She stood for a moment, uneasy, then went back to cleaning. The shovel struck something hard beneath the straw, a dull clink of metal against metal. Ava frowned and dug deeper. The shovel caught on a corner. Kneeling, she brushed the dirt away. What emerged was a small steel box, corroded with rust, its latch half-eaten by time. A faint label on the lid read, Facility HC. She carried the box into the house and placed it on the table. The air smelled of cold dust. Using a hammer and screwdriver, she broke the brittle lock with a snap. The lid groaned open, releasing a faint metallic stench. Inside was a stack of photographs, grainy black and white images of horses restrained in steel enclosures. Some bore tags etched into their skin, R1, R4, R7. Under the photos were papers, their edges warped from moisture. The top page bore the header, Wild Equine Program, Harrow Creek Facility. She flipped through them, typed reports, handwritten notes in the margins. Specimen survival rate below 40%. Aggression increases post-sequence exposure. There was a map folded at the back, a hand-drawn sketch marking a series of fenced pens deep in the northern woods. On the final page, a signature, Dale Riker, Project Overseer. Ava's breath caught. She stared at the name until the letters blurred. The whispers of the Harrow curse suddenly had teeth. She shut the box and leaned back, wiping her hands on her jeans, a shiver crawling up her spine. Outside, the wind shifted, pressing against the windows like something alive. The stable door creaked open and slammed again, though no one stood near it. By dusk, Ava was on the road again, this time heading to the Windfall County Sheriff's Department. The small station sat beside the highway, its lights glowing warm against the snow-gray sky. She carried the box inside. Deputy Nora Kane looked up from her desk. She was young, maybe late 20s, hair pulled back, uniform crisp, but eyes weary. Ava placed the box on the desk. I need you to see this. Nora opened the lid, brows tightening as she thumbed through the photographs. Where did you find these? Under the floor of my stable. The deputy stopped at a photo marked Riker Facility. Her jaw tightened. You recognize the name? Ava asked. Nora nodded slowly. Dale Riker used to run a horse export business down south. There were allegations, cross-border trafficking, genetic tampering, cruelty charges. Case got buried 5 years ago. Not enough evidence. She closed the box gently, then looked up, eyes dark with warning. Be careful, Ava. Some things stay buried because digging them up gets people killed. Ava met her gaze, steady. Then maybe it's time someone dug deep enough. Nora sighed, tapping the lid of the box. I'll check the archives, but promise me you won't do anything reckless. Ava didn't answer. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, soft as ash. Later that night, she stopped at the Red Hollow General Store, the only place still open past 9. The bell above the door jingled, startling two women gossiping near the counter. Their voices dropped when they saw her. That's her, one of them whispered, the ranger who bought Riker's place. I heard he did things up there, the other replied, eyes wide. Experiments. and then gone, just like that. Ava ignored them, picking up a sack of grain and a box of salt blocks. The storekeeper, Martha Boone, an elderly woman with a kind face lined by years of Wyoming wind, rang her up. She studied Ava for a long moment. "Not everyone would sleep on land that remembers blood," Martha said softly. Ava's hand paused over her wallet. She met the woman's gaze. "I'm not afraid of the land," she said. "I'm afraid of forgetting." The old woman nodded as if she understood. "Then maybe you were meant to find it." When Ava stepped back outside, snow was falling harder, muting the sound of her boots on the porch. Somewhere beyond the hills, a faint echo carried through the dark, the rhythm of hooves striking frozen ground. She stopped, listening. It might have been wind or memory, but as she looked toward the black horizon, Ava Morgan knew the past wasn't done breathing yet. Morning came with the color of pale gold and the taste of dust. The fog had thinned, leaving the fields of Harrow Creek shimmering under a fragile sun. The wind was dry now, carrying the faint scent of frost and pine resin. Ava Morgan stood near the stable, hammering a wooden post into the ground. Each strike of the mallet echoed through the quiet valley, a rhythm of work and survival. She was repairing the fence, replacing the rusted wire that sagged like an old scar around the paddock. The wood creaked under pressure, but the sound was oddly comforting. From inside the stable came the soft rustle of straw. Sable was standing again, her legs still thin but strong enough to bear her weight. She chewed lazily at a pile of hay, ears twitching to the rhythm of the hammer. Sometimes she'd give a faint whinny, as if answering the wind. Ava wiped sweat from her temple, her jacket streaked with dirt. There was a calmness in her face, not peace, but a fragile truce. The kind that comes when the world stops demanding and just lets you breathe. A low hum broke the stillness, the sound of an engine. A faded red pickup truck rolled down the dirt road and stopped by the gate. Out stepped an older man in a worn denim coat and a broad hat, his breath rising in the cold air. He waved lazily. "Heard someone moved into the house the ghosts gave up on," he said, his voice gravelly from years of smoke and coffee. "Had to see if the rumors were true." Ava squinted toward him, cautious but polite. "Guess they are," she replied, resting the hammer on her shoulder. The man grinned. Deep lines framed his mouth. "Ben Harrow," he said, offering a hand. "Used to run cattle 2 miles east. Now I mostly talk to the wind." "Ava Morgan," she said, shaking his hand. "You came to check if I'm real or cursed?" He chuckled, a dry, dusty sound. "Bit of both." Ben's boots crunched through the frost as he walked toward the stable, eyes scanning the posts she'd just fixed. "You do all this yourself?" Ava nodded. "I worked Forest Service once. Guess I still like fixing things that can't talk back." "Forests, huh?" Ben lowered himself onto a crate and lit a cigarette. "Different kind of wild, but not softer. Ranges and trees both have tempers." Ava smiled faintly and handed him her thermos. "Coffee." He took it, sniffed, and nodded in approval. "You make it strong. Good." The wind rattled through the eaves. Sable snorted softly behind them, the sound rhythmic and alive. Ben tilted his head toward her. "That your horse?" Ava looked toward the stall. "She found me," she said, "or maybe the other way around. Either way, she was dying in there when I moved in." Ben's brows lifted. "In there?" He exhaled a slow stream of smoke. "Well, I'll be damned." They sat in silence for a while, sharing coffee and quiet. The land around them breathed, the groan of trees, the sigh of the grass, the whistle of wind through the wires. Then Ben spoke again, his voice lower, as if afraid the ground itself might be listening. 7, 8 years ago, he began, a man named Riker bought this place. Said he was starting a sanctuary for wild horses. Folks around here believed him. We wanted to." Ava stayed silent. "He brought in truckloads from Red Mesa. Desert-bred, tough animals. Said he was going to preserve their bloodlines. But things changed fast." Ben took another drag of his cigarette. "He fenced off the back fields, covered them with thick tarps. We stopped seeing the horses run. Trucks came at night, left before dawn." "What kind of trucks?" Ava asked quietly. "Big ones, reinforced trailers, ventilation holes welded shut." His jaw tensed. I was still doing machine work back then. Fixed one of his generators. Heard the horses screaming from the trees. Sounded like they were dying. Ava's grip on her cup tightened. The next morning, Ben continued, he told us not to worry, said they were doing medical checks. Paid the locals well enough to keep mouths closed. A year later, the whole place shut down. Riker vanished. He looked toward the horizon, smoke curling from his nostrils. You know, the ground doesn't forget things like that. Places like this, they remember what we make them witness. Ava said nothing. Her eyes drifted to the mark on Sable's flank. R7, burned deep, still faintly visible beneath the regrown hair. She has that look, Ava murmured. The kind you only see in something that's run from hell and made it out. Ben nodded slowly. Then she remembers too, same as the land. He stubbed his cigarette out on his boot. You're both lucky to have found each other. Later they worked side by side, repairing the eastern fence. Ben brought a spool of wire and a bucket of nails. His movements were slow but sure, the kind that come from decades of habit. This fence used to hold Riker's stock, he muttered. Every time I touch it, it feels wrong. Ava drove another stake into the ground. Do you really believe the land remembers? She asked. Ben paused, tightening the wire until it sang. Sure I do. You can't spill blood without leaving a mark. The grass grows different. The water runs bitter. The ground keeps score, Ranger. She stared at him, the wind catching her hair. The phrase stuck in her chest. The ground keeps score. Sable gave a low whinny from the paddock, as if in agreement. Ben wiped his brow. Listen, he said, softer now. The land gave you a chance, but don't mistake that for safety. Whatever started here might not be done yet. When the work was finished, he slung his tools into the truck. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, turning the valley bronze. Appreciate the help, Ava said. Ben tipped his hat. Just don't ignore what you hear at night, he said. Sometimes it's the past trying to warn you. Then he drove away, leaving behind the faint smell of gasoline and old tobacco. Ava stood by the fence until his taillights disappeared into the birchwoods. Beneath her boots, the earth felt warm, as if something deep beneath the surface had stirred at the sound of his words. That night, Harrow Creek turned the color of ink. The sky was a sheet of blue-black, pierced by scattered stars. No moon, no sound. Even the crickets had gone silent. Inside, Ava sat by the fire, papers spread across the table, the documents from the rusted box. At the bottom of every page was the same name, Riker Corp. Her eyes burned from reading. She rubbed her temples, the flames throwing orange light across her face. Then came the noise, faint, distant, but sharp enough to cut through the stillness. A thud, another, the sound of hooves striking earth in panic. Ava shot to her feet. She grabbed the flashlight and ran outside. The cold hit like a slap. The wind tore at her jacket as she sprinted across the yard, the beam of her light dancing wildly over the ground. Sable, she called. Inside the paddock, the mare was tense, her muscles rigid, nostrils flaring. She stomped at the dirt, snorting, eyes locked toward the far edge of the field. What is it, girl? Ava whispered, stepping closer. Then she saw a shadow. 50 yards away, beyond the fence, a figure stood motionless. Tall shoulders, a broad coat fluttering in the wind. No sound, no movement, just the weight of presence. Hey, Ava shouted. Who's there? No answer. The figure tilted its head slightly, then turned. The motion was smooth, deliberate, and then it vanished into the tree line. Ava ran to the fence, flashlight beam slicing through the mist. Only the marks remained, footprints pressed into the wet soil and the faint acrid scent of diesel smoke. She knelt, touching the print. Fresh. Behind her, Sable pawed the ground, eyes wide, ears pinned back. I know, Ava whispered. I saw him too. She led Sable back into the stall, murmuring softly, her hand gliding over the mare's trembling neck. Easy, girl, it's over. Outside, the wind howled against the walls, then began to fade, leaving behind only the faint rattle of the fence wire. Ava stood there for a long time, watching the shadows in the doorway. Ben's words replayed in her mind. The land keeps score. She finally turned away, went inside and opened her old leather journal. The pages smelled of smoke and pine. She wrote a single line. Someone was outside the fence tonight, not sure if it was memory or warning. Then she set the pen down, blew out the lamp, and let the dark settle in. For a long while, she lay awake, listening. The wind slid through the cracks in the wood, whispering against the glass. And somewhere beyond the edge of hearing, carried faintly through the mist, came the sound of hooves, slow, steady, and fading into the distance. Whether it was a ghost or the echo of the land itself, Ava couldn't tell. But she knew one thing for certain. Harrow Creek was not done remembering. Dawn came thin and grey over the plains of Harrow Creek. The wind carried a sharp chill, heavy with the scent of the season's first snow. Ava stood by the kitchen stove, pouring black coffee into a chipped enamel mug, when the distant sound of tires crunching over frost reached her ears. She glanced out the window. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up at the gate, its headlights cutting through the mist. Deputy Nora Kane stepped out, dark jacket zipped high, boots wet with dew, her expression carved with something close to worry. Ava met her at the porch. "You're up early." "So are you," Nora said, brushing snowflakes from her sleeves. She didn't bother with small talk. "Dale Riker, he's back." The name hung in the air like smoke. Ava's grip tightened around the mug. "That's impossible. He vanished. They said he left the state." "He didn't," Nora said flatly. "He was spotted at a gas station outside Red Hollow last night. Paid cash, no plates." "Heading north," Ava murmured, "toward here." Nora nodded once. "Could be after his research. Could be the horse. Either way, if he's returned, he knows someone's digging." They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind whistling low through the birch trees. Then Nora said quietly, "You shouldn't be here alone, Ava. Not if he's coming for what he left behind." Ava's eyes drifted toward the stable, where a soft sound of movement echoed from within. "If I leave," she said, "this place goes silent again. And I think that's exactly what he wants." Nora didn't argue. She just exhaled, the breath curling white. "Then promise me you'll call if anything changes." "I will," Ava lied. When the cruiser's taillights disappeared into the mist, Ava walked straight to the stable. The ground still held the marks from last night's frost, and something else, deeper, a pair of boot prints half covered in mud. Inside, the smell of hay and dust steadied her. She knelt by the workbench where she'd stored the metal box and laid out its contents one more time. Photos, yellowed documents, the faded map. But when she lifted the false bottom of the box, her heart gave a slow, heavy beat. Hidden beneath was a small black hard drive wrapped in waxed cloth and a carbon copy sheet listing chip codes. Her fingers brushed the brittle paper. R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, R7. Status: unknown. In the corner, a digital signature, D. Riker. Ava turned on the desk lamp, its light slicing the dim air. The codes matched the marks branded onto the horses in the photographs and the one on Sable's flank. She flipped the sheet over. Handwritten notes crawled across the back in faded ink. Hybrid viability low. Repeat sequencing. Must control feral aggression. The words twisted her stomach. "Hybrid," she whispered. "Control." Outside, Sable gave a sharp, uneasy snort, her hooves scraping the floor as if she'd sensed the fear building in her owner's chest. Ava folded the papers carefully, her breath trembling. "It's okay," she said aloud, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the horse or herself. "We'll figure this out." By afternoon, the clouds had thickened, turning the horizon to steel. Ava drove back to Red Hollow, the hard drive tucked inside her coat pocket. At the Hartman Veterinary Clinic, Elise was in the corral, kneeling beside a calf, syringe in hand. She looked up as Ava approached. "You again," she said. "You've got that face, the kind that only shows up when things are about to go wrong." Ava held out the drive. "You were right the first time. I think I found what he left behind." Minutes later, they were inside Elise's small tech room. The air hummed with old machines, the faint smell of antiseptic. Elise connected the drive to her laptop. A folder appeared, encrypted but not enough to keep her out. Riker Corp. Equine Genome. She clicked the first file. Lines of genetic code filled the screen, scrolling endlessly. Ava couldn't read most of it, but Elise's face went pale. "These are hybrid sequences," Elise murmured. He was splicing DNA between wild and domestic breeds, forcing adaptations that shouldn't exist. Strength, endurance, aggression response. Genetic experiments, Ava said, her voice low. Elise nodded grimly. Illegal ones. And from the looks of it, he wasn't studying. He was manufacturing. She clicked another folder. R7, it read. The data filled the screen. Graphs, notes, test images. That's Sable's mark, Ava said. Elise pointed at a line of text at the bottom. Subject O7, high survival resilience, unpredictable temperament, fetal viability pending. Her voice was almost a whisper. Ava, this isn't research, this is imprisonment. Ava's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft whir of the computer fan. Then she's not just a survivor, Ava said, she's evidence. Elise looked up at her, eyes hard, and that makes her a target. The drive home felt longer than usual. The road coiled between dark hills, snow clouds pressing low. In the rearview mirror, a shadow flickered. A pair of headlights far behind her, staying just out of reach. A black pickup. Ava's pulse quickened. She slowed slightly. The truck slowed too. Not today, she muttered. She took the next turn without signaling, veering onto a side road that curved along the ridge. The tires skidded on gravel. She cut her headlights, rolling to a stop behind a slope of dead grass. The truck appeared at the crest, its lights searching the road. Then, after a long pause, it turned around and disappeared back toward the highway. Ava exhaled shakily, gripping the wheel. When she reached the ranch, dusk had already fallen. She killed the engine and stepped out into the cold. The yard was silent. Too silent. Her flashlight beam swept across the paddock, catching glints of water on the fence posts. Then she saw them, fresh tire tracks, deep and wide, pressed into the mud near the stable. And above them, on the wooden fence rail, a streak of mud shaped like a handprint. Someone had been watching. Sable shifted restlessly, ears pinned back, tail flicking. Ava ran a calming hand down the mare's neck. "Shh," she whispered. "I know. I know." The night air felt thicker now, every breath heavy as smoke. Somewhere in the trees, the wind caught on metal. A faint, screeching sound, like wire being dragged across steel. Ava turned slowly toward the sound. Nothing moved, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the land itself was holding its breath. Inside, the house felt smaller than usual. Ava placed the hard drive and documents on the table, the lamplight flickering gold across the peeling walls. She walked to the old safe she'd found in the study weeks ago. Its hinges were stiff, but working again after a coat of oil. She opened it, hesitating for just a second before placing the hard drive, the chip list, and every photograph inside. Then she labeled a folder in thick black ink. Property Evidence, A. Morgan. She locked the safe, slipped the key into the inner pocket of her jacket, and exhaled. The radio on the shelf crackled faintly, spitting static between bursts of weather reports. Snowfront moving in from the north. Visibility expected to drop overnight. Ava shut it off. "Let it come," she muttered. On the coffee table, her father's Colt revolver lay polished and loaded, the same one she'd carried in the forest fires years ago. She checked the chamber, closed it with a soft click, and set it back down. Outside, Sable gave a single sharp whinny, not fear this time, but alertness. Ava looked toward the window. The glass reflected the lamplight, hiding the night beyond. "If he comes," she said quietly, "he'll find I'm not the one running." Then she turned off the light, leaving only the flicker of the oil lamp to hold the dark at bay. She didn't sleep that night. The storm hadn't come yet, but the silence before it felt heavier than thunder. Through the window, the fields lay buried under a sea of fog, the fence posts rising like ghosts from the mist. The world beyond her porch didn't exist, just white and wind. Somewhere far off, an engine murmured and died. Ava's hand hovered near the revolver on the table. She waited, listening. Minutes passed, then a faint pulse of light blinked on the horizon, headlights, and vanished again. She opened her notebook and wrote, her handwriting steady despite the chill. "Tire tracks, unknown vehicle." Elise was right, this isn't over. The fire in the stove had burned down to embers, casting a dull red glow. She rose, wrapped her coat tight, and stepped outside. The air stung her lungs. The world smelled of pine and snow and something older, something watching. Sable lifted her head as Ava approached, eyes glinting in the lamplight. Her breath came in soft plumes. Ava pressed her palm to the mare's neck, feeling the slow rhythm of life beneath the scarred skin. "If he comes back," Ava whispered, "we don't run. We stand." Sable blinked, as if she understood. The wind rose suddenly, sweeping across the plains, moaning through the fences like the voice of the land itself. It didn't sound angry, it sounded awake. For 3 days, Harrow Creek was unnervingly calm, the kind of stillness that didn't soothe but warned, like a held breath before a scream. The wind barely stirred the long grass. The sound of loose chains on the pasture fence was the only reminder that the world hadn't stopped. Sable ate well, moved easily again. Her coat had regained its sheen, and her eyes, once sunken and haunted, now glimmered with something almost like peace. Ava spent those quiet days fixing what she could, stacking firewood under the eaves, sealing the stable roof, and checking the old radio for weather updates. Static hissed between transmissions until a steady male voice broke through. "A winter front is moving across Windfall County. Residents are advised to stay indoors after 10 p.m. Winds expected to exceed 50 miles an hour. Heavy snow possible." Ava turned off the radio and looked west. The horizon was gathering darkness, clouds thickening like bruises, the air shifting with a metallic tension. She could smell snow long before it came. Sable paced restlessly in her stall, hooves striking the packed dirt in a nervous rhythm. She blew air through her nostrils, ears flicking back, muscles tight. Ava laid a calming hand on her neck. "It's all right, girl," she whispered. But deep down she knew something else was coming. Not just a storm. That night the first gusts arrived like an ambush. Wind howled down from the mountains, bending the birches until their branches scraped the roof. The moon vanished behind thick, violent clouds. Then the world broke open. Thunder cracked, rolling across the valley like artillery fire. Rain came hard and sideways, hammering the roof of the house. Ava grabbed her flashlight and coat, the wind nearly ripping the door from her hands as she stepped outside. The rain stung like needles. Every few seconds, lightning turned the landscape into a white blur. The stable was shaking, the old tin roof clattering under each gust. From inside came a sound that pierced through the storm. Sable's panicked neigh, raw and desperate. Ava pushed through the mud and swung the stall door open. "Easy, girl, easy." The mare was thrashing, her sides slick with sweat and rain. Her breathing came fast, almost wheezing. Lightning flashed again, and that's when Ava saw it. The mare's belly was tight, trembling, the muscles contracting violently. Water pooled beneath her, streaked with blood and straw. "Oh God," Ava whispered, "she's in labor." Thunder answered her. The door slammed against the wall as another gust tore through. Ava shoved it closed, latching it from the inside. The wind screamed like a living thing. The smell of earth, blood, and wet hay filled the air. Sable reared halfway, groaning. Ava caught her halter, steadying her, whispering words that were half comfort, half prayer. "You're all right. I've got you. You're not alone." She grabbed a handful of clean straw, spreading it across the floor, and then unrolled an old blanket, tying it into strips for towels. The light bulb overhead flickered violently, shadows whipping across the walls like ghosts. Outside, the storm howled without pause. Inside, 2 heartbeats pounded, one human, one equine, against the roar of a wild, indifferent sky. Ava knelt beside Sable, hands trembling but certain. Every instinct in her, the ranger, the rescuer, the survivor, came alive. She pressed her palm against the mare's side, feeling the rhythm of contractions rippling beneath the skin. Sable's breathing was labored, nostrils flaring, body slick with sweat and rain. "Come on, girl," Ava whispered, her own hair plastered to her face. "No one's leaving anyone behind this time." The mare screamed, a deep guttural sound that cut through thunder, and Ava felt the tremor run through her arms as the muscles seized again. Lightning flashed, white and violent. For a heartbeat, everything froze. 2 silhouettes caught in the glare, a woman and a dying horse locked in a battle for life. Ava wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. You've got this. Come on, one more. The wind slammed against the stable walls, rain exploding through the cracks, but she didn't move. She stayed on her knees beside Sable, murmuring words she barely heard herself say. Then came the next contraction. Harder, longer. Ava saw the small, slick shape begin to appear. She reached in, guiding gently, just like she remembered watching Elise do once, long ago. That's it, Sable. That's it. Push. The storm answered with another crack of thunder. Ava pulled gently but firmly, and suddenly the weight gave way. A limp, wet foal slid into her arms, motionless. For a moment, the entire world stopped. No, she gasped. No, not like this. She tore a strip from the blanket and wiped the foal's nostrils, clearing mud and membrane. Then she pressed her lips close and blew softly, once, twice, and the smallest shuddering breath came back. Ava laughed, a sound half sob, half triumph. You did it, girl. You did it. Sable groaned, collapsing onto her side. Her eyes fluttered shut, chest rising and falling in slow, exhausted waves. The foal twitched weakly. Ava pulled it close, wrapping it in the blanket, rubbing warmth into its body. Then Sable lifted her head, trembling, heavy, and reached for her newborn, nuzzling it with slow, broken affection. Lightning flared one last time, throwing their shadows high against the wall. A woman kneeling between mother and child, her hands covered in mud and tears, surrounded by the ruin of the storm. And yet somehow, in the center of it, something sacred had been born. By the time the thunder began to fade, the rain had turned to mist. Ava sat back on her heels, exhausted beyond thought. The mare was alive. The foal was breathing. That was enough. She wrapped a clean towel around the newborn and placed it close to Sable's chest. The tiny creature stirred, its fur a pale mix of sand and silver grey, neither wild nor tame, as if the earth itself couldn't decide which it wanted it to be. Sable nickered softly, her muzzle brushing the foal's back in silent encouragement. Ava's voice broke as she spoke. You made it, both of you. She slumped against the stall wall, her arms streaked with mud and blood, her heartbeat slowing. Rain dripped from the beams above, tapping rhythmically onto the straw. The foal tried to stand, legs shaking, slipping, trying again, until finally, with a wobbling grace, it found balance. Sable watched, pride and pain mingling in her gaze. Ava smiled, tears glinting under the flicker of lightning. Hope, she whispered. That's your name. Hope. The foal lifted its head, eyes reflecting a flash of pale light. Eyes that looked too bright, too alive for something just born. Sable sighed, leaning forward to rest her head against Ava's shoulder. The warmth of her breath melted something frozen inside the woman. Outside, the storm still moaned across the valley, but its voice was softer now, almost like a lullaby. By dawn, the storm had spent itself. Rainwater shimmered on the ground like molten silver, and snow began to fall in slow, delicate flakes. The light of morning filtered through the half-open stable door, painting the scene in pale gold. Ava hadn't slept. She sat cross-legged on the straw, her back against the wooden beam, a blanket around her shoulders. Sable lay peacefully, eyes closed, her body rising and falling with the rhythm of deep rest. The foal, Hope, was curled beside her, its tiny chest rising in quiet, perfect time. For the first time in years, Ava didn't feel hollow. She felt present. She stood, stretching sore limbs, and pushed the stable door open wider. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and pine. The yard was battered, a few fence rails broken, shingles scattered across the mud, but the house still stood. So did she. She turned back toward the stall. Sunlight struck through the doorway, illuminating mother and child. Sable's fur gleamed faintly. Hope blinked and then rose shakily to its feet, taking a few unsteady steps toward the light. Ava lifted her old camera from the shelf, a relic from her ranger days, and snapped a photo. The lens captured nothing perfect, just straw, mud, mist, and two fragile lives pressed together in the afterglow of survival. It was enough. She lowered the camera and whispered, "We made it." Outside, the snow began to settle over the field, softening every scar, erasing every track. Even the deep tire marks from the night before were vanishing under the white. But Ava knew better than to think that meant safety. Storms always left more than wreckage. Some left reminders, some left warnings. She stepped outside, closing the stable door behind her. The cold air bit at her skin, but she didn't flinch. Across the horizon, sunlight spilled between the clouds, the faintest promise of spring hidden in the heart of winter. And though the land was silent now, she could feel it humming beneath her boots, alive, awake, and waiting. Somewhere beyond the hills and the snow, the real storm was still coming. Not of wind or rain, but of men. And Ava Morgan was ready for it. The afternoon after the storm was almost too calm. The clouds had broken apart into soft, drifting ribbons, sunlight glinting off the wet grass. Harrow Creek shimmered like a lake of glass and ash, every puddle holding a reflection of the pale blue above. Ava worked in silence, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. The stable smelled of damp hay and iron. She replaced the straw, scrubbed the walls, and brushed the mud from Sable's coat. Outside, Sable and Hope stood side by side, their breath turning to mist in the crisp air. The world sounded clean again, too clean. The only noise was the slow drip of water from the roof, steady and hypnotic. It should have been peace. It wasn't. As Ava swept the floor, the shovel struck something solid. The wood beneath her feet creaked strangely. She crouched down, brushed away a patch of straw, and saw the glint of metal. Faint, but deliberate, she cleared more dirt. A square outline appeared, a steel hatch, its hinges crusted with rust, its latch nearly fused shut. A chill prickled the back of her neck. She looked around the quiet stable. No one. Only the sigh of wind through the fence. "Riker," she whispered under her breath, "what else did you bury here?" The hatch groaned when she pulled. The sound split the air like a scream. Ava grabbed her flashlight, jammed a crowbar under the latch, and forced it open. The hinges shrieked before giving way. A gush of cold, stale air rose from below, thick with a smell of iron and rot. She hesitated, then she descended. The narrow stairway was carved from concrete slick with moss. Pipes ran along the walls, sweating rust. The deeper she went, the quieter it became, until the only sound left was her heartbeat echoing against stone. At the bottom, the flashlight beam swept across a room about 10 meters wide, bare, industrial, and wrong. The walls were lined with chains. Thick iron rings were bolted into the concrete, their edges worn from years of strain. Tubes snaked across the floor, cracked and stained dark red. The air smelled metallic, blood, machine oil, and time. Her light moved upward and caught a faint stenciled logo across the far wall. Riker Corp, Controlled Breeding Unit R7. The words hit like a blow. Ava's breath caught. The wall seemed to press in. In the far corner, a table lay overturned. On it sat a small silver case, its lid warped but still sealed. She forced it open. Inside was another external hard drive labeled Project R7, Export Log. Beside it was a handwritten logbook. Its pages were water-stained but legible. Shipment number 112. Route, Harrow Creek, Santa Rosa, MX. Specimens, 6 mares, 2 stallions, genetic series, R. Ava read the words twice before the meaning sank in. They weren't breeding, they were trafficking. Her vision blurred. The notebook trembled in her hands. "Sable," she whispered, "you were here." The flashlight flickered once, then steadied, illuminating the stains along the floor where hooves had once thrashed, where chains had pulled tight. She shut the notebook, tucked it under her arm, and climbed out of the hole before the walls could start whispering. Back in the daylight, the world felt too bright. She dropped the hatch shut, locking it with the rusted latch. She needed to call Nora. She pulled out her phone. No bars. She tried the radio next, only static, a harsh, buzzing shriek that seemed to crawl through her skull. "Come on," she muttered, twisting the dials. Nothing. She stepped outside and looked up at the antenna mounted to the roof. The cable hung loose, the end cut clean through. Her blood went cold. The wind was rising again, whispering through the grass. It didn't sound like warning anymore. It sounded like the land remembering fear. Ava ran back inside, shoved the new hard drive and the logbook into a leather satchel, and locked them in the safe. The metal door clicked shut, solid and final. When she returned to the stable, Sable was restless, pacing, snorting, ears flicking toward the forest. Hope stayed close, pressing against her mother's side. Ava stroked Sable's neck, voice calm, though her hands trembled. "Shh. It's all right, girl. If anything happens, I'll get you out." But even as she said it, she knew it was no longer a question of if. By nightfall, the air had turned heavy. Fog rolled in from the west, thick and silver, swallowing the fence lines one by one. Ava built a small fire in the hearth, trying to chase away the damp chill creeping under the door. The house crackled softly. For a moment, she let herself breathe. Then she heard it. A low rumble, distant at first, then closer. The unmistakable growl of a diesel engine cutting through the fog. Her pulse quickened. She stood, walked to the window, and peered out. Through the haze, a pair of headlights glowed, too bright and too steady to belong to anyone from Red Hollow. She turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Her breath came shallow. The engine drew closer. The lights cut across the yard, then stopped. Doors opened. 3 silhouettes stepped out. Ava's stomach turned to stone. At the center stood Dale Riker. His hair was shorter now, streaked white at the sides. A long leather coat hung from his shoulders. Even from across the yard, she could see the smirk. "I was wondering," he called out, his voice smooth and cracked like dry paper, "who'd have the guts to move into my old place?" Ava stepped onto the porch, Colt in hand. "It's not yours anymore." Riker's eyes glittered. "Oh, everything here is mine, sweetheart. The land, the data, even that horse you're hiding." He turned to his 2 men, broad-armed, dressed in work jackets, and nodded. "Find it. Bring the mare, the foal too." They moved toward the stable, flashlights cutting white lines through the fog. Ava's heart hammered. They were here for Sable, and for the proof. She sprinted through the back door, boots splashing through puddles. The fog swallowed her immediately. She moved fast, her breath forming clouds, her hands shaking as she unlatched the stable door. Sable jerked her head up, muscles tensing. Hope whinnied softly. "Quiet," Ava whispered. "We're leaving." She slipped a halter over Sable's neck, tied a lead around Hope's chest, and opened the rear gate. The cold hit like a wall, wind carrying flurries of new snow. Behind her, the faint crunch of footsteps broke the air. Closer now, flashlights bobbed between the trees. "Go," Ava hissed. The horses obeyed, hooves sinking into the soft mud as she led them toward the narrow trail that curved behind the property, the same path that wound through the northern woods toward Ben Harrow's old hunting cabin. By the time they reached the tree line, her breath burned in her lungs. She tied the leads around a thick cluster of branches, whispered, "Stay quiet, don't run," and turned back toward the glow of her house. From the distance came the sound of wood splintering. The front door kicked open. Riker's voice boomed across the yard. "Where is she?" Ava checked her weapon. The cylinder was full. Her thumb brushed the engraving on the grip, her father's initials. Then she started walking back into the fog, toward the lights. Riker was waiting in the yard, hands buried in his coat pockets, a flashlight beam cutting through the swirling mist. Ava stepped from the shadows, her breath visible in the cold. The Colt was steady in her hand. "Stop right there," she said. Riker turned slowly, the light catching the edge of his face. He smiled. "You think you saved it, don't you? That mare, that project." "I saved what you tried to destroy." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You don't understand what we built here. We weren't just breeding animals. We were rewriting evolution. Wild doesn't mean free, Ranger. It means unrefined. Dangerous. We fixed that." Ava's voice cut through the wind. "Then why are you the one hiding from it?" Riker's smile faltered. His eyes darkened. "Because freedom doesn't stay loyal." He took a step forward. "Stop," Ava warned, raising the gun. 2 shapes moved in the fog behind him, his men circling wide. She saw the glint of steel in their hands. "One more step and I shoot," she said. Riker didn't stop. "You won't. You're too much like them. You can't kill what you pity." A shot rang out, not hers. The bullet tore through the air, slamming into the wooden crate beside her. Splinters flew. Ava dropped behind the old truck, firing back. The first shot hit the tire, blowing it out with a thunderous crack. Smoke filled the air. Riker shouted, "Get the hard drive! Don't let her walk out of here alive!" The men split. One darted toward the porch. Ava swung out from behind the truck and fired again. A clean hit to the man's shoulder. He dropped his weapon and stumbled back, cursing. The wind howled, carrying flakes of ice that stung her face. She could barely see through the snow and smoke. A second figure lunged from the fog, grabbing her arm. She drove an elbow into his ribs, fired point blank into the ground at his feet. He fell back, screaming. Riker's voice came again, closer now, cold and furious. "You can't stop this, Morgan. You think killing me changes what's already in motion." She rose from behind the truck, gun leveled at his chest. "No," she said, "but it's a start." Before he could move, headlights flooded the yard, red and blue, flashing in the mist. Police. A shout echoed through the storm, sirens wailed, then cut off. Doors slammed. Deputy Nora Kane stepped out of her cruiser, weapon drawn, her voice steady. "Riker, drop it, hands where I can see them." Riker spun toward her, eyes wide. For the first time, he looked unsure. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he snarled. "Try me," Nora said. She fired once, a warning shot that punched through the side of the truck, showering sparks. His two remaining men froze, raising their hands, but Riker turned and bolted for the woods. Ava stepped into his path. The Colt leveled. "There's nowhere left to run." He stopped, chest heaving. "You don't get it," he hissed. "You think I'm the monster. I'm just one link. They'll come for the data, for the animals. For you." Nora closed in from behind. "We'll be ready for them." Riker hesitated, then lunged. Nora moved first, sweeping his arm aside and slamming him face first into the mud. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "You're under arrest," she said calmly, "for animal trafficking, illegal genetic modification, and attempted homicide." The wind picked up again, sweeping across the field. The last embers of the fire blew out. The land exhaled, long and deep, as if finally releasing something it had held for years. By morning, the storm had passed. Snow glittered faintly over the wet ground, and the fences were glazed in frost. Police cars filled the yard, officers loaded evidence into crates, hard drives, notebooks, even the silver box from the basement. Ava stood by the fence, watching. Her hands were still trembling, but her eyes were clear. Nora approached, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You took a hell of a risk tonight," she said, "but you didn't just save that mare. You stopped something much bigger." Ava exhaled, her breath fogging in the cold. "Maybe. Or maybe I just slowed it down." From the edge of the forest came a familiar sound, hooves crunching through snow. Sable and Hope emerged from the mist, their coats dusted white, eyes bright and alive. Ava smiled softly. "You're safe now," she murmured. Riker was being led to a patrol car, his arrogance gone, face pale and hollow. He caught her gaze once as they pushed him inside. For the first time, he looked small, like a man realizing the land he tried to own had finally turned against him. The sun rose over Harrow Creek, gold light spilling across the melting snow. The reflection off the puddles shimmered like liquid metal. Ava tightened her grip on Sable's reins, feeling the warmth of life pulse beneath her palm. Hope nuzzled her side, small and unsteady, but strong. Nora turned to her. "What now?" Ava looked toward the horizon, the endless stretch of open plains, bright and quiet. "Now," she said, "we rebuild." The two women stood in silence as the police convoy rolled away, engines fading into the distance, and for the first time in years, the air over Harrow Creek felt clean. The land had spoken. The past was no longer buried. It was alive and free. 3 weeks after the night at Harrow Creek, winter loosened its grip. The last storm had passed, leaving Cheyenne washed in white light and thawing streets that glimmered like mirrors. Patches of snow clung to rooftops, while the courthouse dome caught the morning sun. Outside the United States District Court, Cheyenne Division, a quiet crowd gathered. Townsfolk, animal rights volunteers, and reporters from Denver and Billings. Handwritten signs waved in the cold wind. Justice for the wild, freedom for the forgotten. Ava climbed the courthouse steps slowly, her long brown coat brushing against her boots, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Behind her walked Deputy Nora Kane, crisp in her uniform, and Dr. Elise Hartman, carrying a case full of documents. Across the street, Ben Harrow pulled up in his old red pickup, hat in hand, his weathered face unreadable but steady. The Wyoming state flag snapped in the wind, a blue field, a white buffalo, a symbol of endurance in a land that had stayed silent too long. The courtroom was cold, solemn, full. Every bench was taken, every breath held. At the defense table sat Dale Riker, thinner than before, beard uneven, wrists bound by a light chain. His eyes no longer held arrogance, only the echo of something that used to be control. The prosecutor began, his voice clear and sharp as glass. The defendant stands accused of the illegal capture and confinement of protected wildlife, unauthorized genetic experimentation, cross-border animal trafficking, and destruction of federal evidence. The defense lawyer spoke of scientific intent, of innovation for preservation, but the prosecutor cut him short. Research doesn't bleed. Progress doesn't scream. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, then fell silent again. Ava sat in the witness section, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beneath the solemn air, grief and anger pulsed in her chest. For the land, the animals, and the silence that had swallowed them all. When her name was called, Ava rose and walked to the stand, her boots clicking softly against the polished floor. The oath felt heavy, but her voice did not waver. She began from the beginning. The lonely ranch, the scarred mare, the rusted fences and the cold mornings filled with wind and silence. She described finding the metal box, the R7 branding, and the files that told a story darker than any storm. On the screen behind her, projected photos appeared one by one. The stable, the hidden hatch, the chains, the notebook, and finally Sable and Hope under the sunrise. The prosecutor asked quietly, "Why didn't you walk away when you realized how dangerous it was?" Ava met his gaze. "Because I've seen forests burn. I've seen people run from what needs saving. I couldn't do it again. Not when I knew what it cost to stay silent." The room was silent. From the audience, someone sniffed quietly. Ben Harrow bowed his head, holding his hat over his chest, the small gesture of a man paying respect to something sacred. Next came Nora Kane. She spoke with the calm precision of a law officer, detailing the night of the raid, the fog, the gunfire, the arrests, and the evidence seized. "Riker didn't just break the law," she said. "He betrayed the meaning of protection itself. People trusted him to preserve life, and he used that trust to cage it." Then Dr. Elise Hartman took the stand. Her voice trembled slightly, but every word carried weight. "I've reviewed the genetic data," she said, opening a folder. "These were not conservation experiments. The DNA was altered to induce pain thresholds, muscle hypertrophy, and aggression responses. They weren't studying survival. They were manufacturing suffering." She lifted a photograph of Sable and Hope, now projected across the wall. Even after everything, this mare still trusted a human hand. "I don't think any of us deserve that forgiveness." When she stepped down, no one spoke. Even the judge paused before continuing, allowing the silence to settle. Ben Harrow was the last to testify. He leaned on his wooden cane, his hat tucked under his arm. His voice was rough, his age showing in each breath. "I worked for Riker once," he said. "I saw the trucks leave in the dark. I heard the cries. I didn't speak because I was a coward. I thought silence kept the peace, but silence kept them dying." He turned toward Riker. "I'm here now to make sure that land sleeps easy again." No one moved. The only sound was the soft tapping of his cane as he left the stand, a sound that echoed like the final knock of guilt itself. Judge Evelyn Drake read the verdict in a voice that filled every corner of the room. Her silver hair caught the light as she looked down at the papers before her. "The court has heard the testimony, reviewed the evidence, and found the accused guilty on all counts. What you did, Mr. Riker, was not science. It was cruelty disguised as progress." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "Justice isn't only for people. It's for what keeps us human." The last image projected was of Sable and Hope running through the open fields of Harrow Creek, two specks of life against an endless horizon. The gavel struck. 25 years in federal custody. Riker bowed his head, wordless. The echo of the gavel lingered like thunder, fading into light. Outside, the sky above Cheyenne was startlingly blue. The snow had melted into shallow puddles that shimmered beneath the sun. Ava stepped down the courthouse steps, breath fogging in the cold air. Across the plaza, Nora gave a short interview. Elise stood gazing at the horizon, and Ben sat on the low stone wall, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. A sunbeam caught Ava's face, forcing her to squint. After months of darkness, the light felt almost too bright to bear. She turned north, toward the memory of a ranch where the snow was melting into green. In her mind, she could hear the sound of hooves and the low, gentle whinny of a mare calling to her foal. Ava smiled faintly. "We made it," she murmured, "all of us." As she walked away, her boots left prints in the soft slush, the first footprints of spring leading home. A month later, Harrow Creek was reborn. The snow had retreated into the mountains, and the valley breathed again. Streams cut silver lines through the meadows, and young grass shimmered under the morning sun. The old ranch no longer looked haunted. New boards gleamed in the fences, the roof shone with fresh tin, and the smell of pine resin mingled with the scent of paint. Ava sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Sable and Hope graze near the new fence line. Hope's mane had grown long and bright, tossing in the wind. The world felt warm again, alive. Across the field, Ben Harrow's red truck rattled up the hill, loaded with lumber. Elise Hartman followed soon after, her vet's kit slung over her shoulder. Together, the three of them had started what they called the second life of Harrow Creek. They worked through long days of sunlight. Ben and Ava replaced old beams, hammered new posts, and strung solar lights across the yard. Elise checked the troughs, calibrated medical equipment, and set up clean stalls with hay and blankets. On the wall where the faded Riker Corp logo had once been, they hung a new wooden sign carved by hand, Sable Sanctuary, a home for the wild and the broken. Ben stood back, admiring it with a half smile. "This land's seen pain," he said, "but it remembers healing too." Elise added softly, "We can't erase what was done here, but maybe we can build something good on top of it." Ava looked around, at the repaired roof, the scent of fresh sawdust, the hum of life returning. She wrote in her notebook, "Day 1. Sanctuary opened. Mother and foal strong." The sunlight hit the new roof, turning the entire ranch into a beacon of gold. By early April, word had spread through the valley. On the morning of the opening ceremony, a convoy of trucks and cars wound down the dirt road from Red Hollow. Families brought flowers, ribbons, loaves of bread, and hand-painted signs that read, "Welcome Sable and Hope." Children ran to the fences squealing as they saw the horses up close. Sable stood calm and proud. Hope trotted in circles, curious and unafraid. Ben led them gently forward, letting the children touch their necks. Elise coordinated volunteers with quiet efficiency, handing out brushes and feed. Ava stood before the new sign, wearing a white shirt and jeans, her hair tied high. When Nora Kane arrived in uniform, the small crowd hushed. She climbed a short wooden platform, microphone in hand. The wind softened. Birds sang from the birches nearby. Nora's voice carried, steady and clear. "Today isn't just about opening a rescue center," she said. "It's about opening something in ourselves. Mercy isn't a luxury. It's the proof that we're still human." The crowd erupted in applause. Some people wiped their eyes. Ava turned towards Sable, who raised her head as if understanding the moment. Hope nuzzled her side, tail flicking in the sunlight. Elise leaned close to Ava, whispering, "Sometimes it's the broken ones who teach us how to stand again." Ava nodded, unable to speak. By late afternoon, the visitors began to drift home. The valley grew quiet again, filled only with the rustle of grass and the soft sigh of wind. Ava stood alone before the sanctuary sign, tracing the carved letters with her fingertips. The wood was still warm from the sun. In the distance, Ben cleaned up tools. Elise spoke with the last volunteers, and Nora leaned against her cruiser, watching the horses play. Ava whispered, more to the land than to anyone else, $5 for a ranch, but it bought back my soul." A gentle breeze swept across the field, rippling the grass like waves. Sable walked over, nudging her shoulder. Hope rolled in the grass, her coat catching the golden light. Ava laughed softly, the sound of someone who'd finally stopped running. Evening came slow and bright. The sun hung low, spilling gold across the open plains. From a distance, the valley looked reborn. Fences gleaming, roofs straight, the new wooden sign shining like a promise. Sable and Hope ran together through the meadow, their hooves scattering dust that caught the light like sparks. Ava stood beside Ben and Elise on the porch, arms crossed, content just to watch. From across the yard, Nora called out, half teasing, "Looks like freedom runs on four legs." Elise smiled. "And sometimes," she said, "it wears the face of trust." Ava said nothing, only nodded, her eyes following the two horses as they galloped into the horizon. The camera of memory seemed to pull back, revealing all of Harrow Creek. The river curving like a silver thread, the pine ridge standing tall, the land wide and clean again. The wind rose, carrying the echo of distant whinnies, and over it words seemed to linger, unspoken yet understood. Freedom isn't the absence of chains. It's the moment your heart chooses to believe in what's been saved. On the far ridge, a herd of wild mustangs appeared, silhouettes against the dying light. They paused, watching the ranch below. Sable lifted her head and called out, a single ringing note that filled the valley. Hope pranced forward, following her mother's gaze. As the last light of day spilled over the hills, horse and horizon met. And in that meeting, the wild, the human, and the redeemed became one. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out, hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.